The Fox Queen's heir went missing. The human did what no one else could. The Fox Queen ruled the Verelion, a clans from a palace grown, not built. Crystal branches curved into halls, and living light flowed through the walls like calm breathing. For 3 centuries, her voice had kept the clans united, her decisions steady and respected across the galaxy. But now, for the first time in her long reign, silence filled the throne chamber in a way that felt wrong. Her heir was missing. Princess Liren, the Fox Queen's only child, had vanished during a routine diplomatic transit. The journey was simple, safe, and well documented. No hostile systems, no wars, no known threats. The ship had entered neutral space and never arrived at its destination. There was no debris, no distress signal, no trace left behind. At first, the Queen had believed it was a delay. Space was wide, and even the best engines could fail. But hours became days, and days became weeks. Each passing cycle tightened something unseen around the clans. Liren was more than a princess. She was a symbol, future. Without her, old rivals would begin to whisper. Ancient agreements depended on her eventual ascension. The Queen understood this better than anyone. Still, she kept her composure, even as fear spread through the lower courts like a quiet shadow. The galaxy responded quickly. Investigators arrived from a dozen species. Sensor arrays swept entire star lanes. Psychic observers searched for emotional echoes. Probability analysts ran endless simulations. Every advanced method known to the galactic community was used. Nothing worked. No trail appeared. No signal emerged. The space where the heir should have been remained empty, clean, and silent. The Queen listened to reports without interruption. Each failure was delivered with apologies and careful words. Finally, after the last delegation left, she stood alone before the great window. Watching stars drift past like distant memories, she knew something the others did not. When power, wealth, and intelligence all failed at once, the answer was rarely more technology. Sometimes, it required a different way of thinking entirely. The Queen summoned her closest advisor, Elder Savell, whose fur had faded from silver to pale white over the decades. "There is one option left," the Queen said softly. Savell hesitated. "Majesty, if you speak of the human, the council has failed," the Queen replied, her voice calm but firm. "Everyone has failed." Savell lowered his head. He had expected this. Humans were controversial. They were not the strongest species, not the longest lived, not the most advanced in raw technology. Yet again and again, they appeared at the center of events no one else could resolve. Most species did not trust that. Humans relied on instincts, emotions, and personal judgment more than formal systems. To the Verelians, this seemed chaotic, even dangerous. But the Queen had watched humans for many years. She had seen them walk into broken situations and emerge with answers that made no logical sense, yet worked. "The human you suggest is not aligned with any government," Savell said carefully. "No official authority, no psychic ability, no formal rank." "Exactly," the Queen said. "No one will suspect him, and no one will control him." Within the hour, a message was sent across private channels, encrypted beyond normal diplomatic codes. It reached a small human vessel, traveling far from major trade routes. The human read the message alone. His name was Elias Morin. He was not famous, not powerful, and not wealthy. He was known only through quiet records cases marked unresolved, then suddenly closed. Lost ships found. Missing people returned. Situations where logic failed, but outcomes succeeded. Elias did not answer immediately. He read the message twice. A missing royal heir. Weeks gone. No evidence. Most humans would have declined. This was far above normal risk. But Elias felt something familiar stir in his thoughts. The kind of absence that meant someone was missing in a very specific way. He accepted. When Elias arrived at the Verelian capital, his presence caused quiet discomfort. He wore simple clothing. No weapons. No visible tools beyond a small data pad and an old-fashioned notebook made of pressed fiber. Alien officials watched him closely. Some with curiosity, others with clear doubt. "This is the human," one delegate whispered. "He looks ordinary," Elias noticed, of course. Humans always notice such things. He did not react. Instead, he looked around the palace, observing the way guards stood, the spacing of corridors, the emotional tone in the air. Years of experience had taught him that environments spoke louder than people. The Fox Queen received him privately. She studied him with sharp, intelligent eyes. Elias met her gaze without challenge or fear. Not out of arrogance, but respect. "You know why you are here?" the Queen said. "Yes," Elias replied simply. "You also know what is at stake." Yes, the Queen waited, expecting questions. Technology, access, data files, authority limits. Humans often surprised her, but rarely this much. "You ask nothing?" she said. Elias considered his words carefully. "I will need records, yes. But first, I want to know who your daughter is." Not as a title. As a person, Giza's Daysotes tilted slightly. A Varelian sign of surprise. No investigator had asked that. They asked where Lorraine went, what she wore, what ship she used. No one asked who she was. "She is thoughtful," the Queen said slowly. "Curious. She questions tradition, but never disrespects it. She carries the weight of expectation quietly." Elias nodded. He wrote nothing down. Over the next days, he reviewed every available record, but not the way others had. He skipped repeated sensor scans. He ignored probability charts. Instead, he read transcripts of conversations. He studied minor delays in schedules. He noted who hesitated when answering questions and who answered too quickly. The galaxy searched for force. Elias searched for choice. Something felt wrong about the idea of an abduction. There was no panic signal, no sudden break in pattern. Ships did not simply disappear without leaving something behind, lest they were not taken, unless they left. When Elias shared this thought with the advisory council, the reaction was immediate disbelief. "The Heir would not abandon her duty," one official said sharply. "I didn't say abandon," Elias replied calmly. "I said choose. Those are different things." The room fell quiet. Elias explained his reasoning in simple terms. There were small gaps in the logs. Moments where the ship had altered course slightly, legally, without alarms. Nothing illegal. Nothing aggressive. Someone had guided, not forced. That idea unsettled the council more than any threat, because it meant the enemy was not stronger, but smarter. And because it meant the Heir was still alive. Far away, in a place erased from current star maps, Princess Lorraine stood near a viewport, watching a dim star flicker. She was safe, fed, unharmed, but she was alone. And somewhere in the vast silence between systems, a human was walking steadily toward the truth, using nothing more than patience, empathy, and the stubborn human refusal to accept that something lost was gone forever. The council chamber felt colder after Elias spoke. Not physically, but in the way uncertainty settled into the air. The idea that the Fox Queen's heir had chosen her path, even briefly, disturbed everyone present. For the Varelian clan's duty was not a suggestion. It was a foundation. Choice existed, but always inside carefully drawn lines. Elias left the chamber quietly, allowing the officials to argue among themselves. He had learned long ago that pushing too hard too fast made people defensive. Humans survived not by force alone, but by timing. Let doubt grow on its own. He returned to the guest quarters assigned to him, smooth-walled rooms shaped for Varelian comfort rather than human needs. Elias did not mind. Discomfort helped him focus. He placed his notebook on a low surface and began to organize his thoughts, not by data, but by story. Someone had reached Princess Lorraine without alarms triggering. That meant trust, or at least the appearance of it. The ship's logs showed minor legal reroutes, nothing unusual for diplomatic vessels adjusting to traffic. To most analysts, it was noise. To Elias, It was language. The changes formed a pattern. Not random. Not rushed. He requested access to older star charts, ones no longer used. When asked why, Elias simply said, "People hide best in places everyone agrees are empty." The archivists complied, though some exchanged doubtful glances. Ancient charts filled his screen routes marked obsolete. Stations listed as decommissioned, regions labeled as economically irrelevant. Elias felt a quiet sense of recognition. Humans had abandoned places like these many times, leaving behind ghosts of effort and hope. Meanwhile, across the palace, the Fox Queen watched reports scrolled silently before her. She trusted Elias, though she could not fully explain why. Perhaps it was the way he listened without trying to impress, or the way he spoke of her daughter as a person, not a symbol. Elder Saville approached her side. "The council's divided," he said softly. "Some believe the human's theory is disrespectful." "They confuse respect with comfort," the queen replied. "Truth is rarely comfortable." Elias soon identified 3 possible locations where Loren could have been guided. Each lay outside modern traffic lanes. Each had once held purpose. One, in particular, drew his attention. A relay station officially destroyed 2 centuries ago during a trade collapse. Its coordinates still existed, but no ships visited anymore. He did not inform the council immediately. Instead, he prepared his own vessel. He preferred to see things before explaining them. That habit had saved lives before departure. The queen requested a private meeting. "If you are wrong," she said quietly, "this may cost us more time than we can afford." "If I am wrong," Elias replied, "then we learn something useful. But if I am right, waiting will only make things worse." The queen studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Go." Elias traveled alone. His ship was small, unremarkable, and deliberately outdated in appearance. Many advanced sensors had been removed or disabled. In their place were manual controls and adaptable systems. Humans learned long ago that complex machines failed in simple ways, but simple tools could adapt. As he crossed into forgotten space, the stars grew thinner, communications delayed. Automated warnings pinged his console, suggesting course corrections. Elias ignored them, near the predicted coordinates. His sensors registered faint power fluctuations, too weak for standard scans, but consistent over time. Someone was maintaining something carefully. He powered down most systems and drifted closer. The station emerged slowly from the dark, its outer structure scarred but intact. Someone had repaired it without restoring it. A deliberate choice. It looked dead from a distance, exactly as intended. Elias did not dock immediately. He observed patterns of energy use, heat dispersal, life support cycling. This was not a prison. It was a refuge. Inside the station, Princess Loren felt a strange shift. The quiet she had grown used to felt different, as if the station itself had noticed something. She stood still, her ears twitching slightly. Whoever had brought her here had promised safety, not isolation. But they rarely spoke now. She had been told she was protecting her people by staying hidden, that her absence prevented a greater threat. At first, the logic seemed sound. Over time, doubt had crept in. She missed her mother. She missed choice back in the palace. The council finally realized Elias had left. Panic spread. Unauthorized action. Risk. Possible provocation. Messages were prepared, demanding his return. The Fox Queen stopped them. "Let him work," she said. "We have tried everything else." Elias docked with the station quietly, using an auxiliary port masked by structural damage. He moved slowly, unarmed, lights low. His footsteps echoed softly through abandon. Corridors. The air smelled recycled but clean. He followed signs of recent activity until he reached a central chamber. A figure stood near the viewport. "Princess Loren," Elias said gently, not approaching. She turned, startled but not afraid. The human before her did not look like a rescuer from legend. He looked tired, real. "I'm not here to take you by force," Elias continued. I'm here to ask why you came. Her silence lasted long enough to feel heavy. Finally she spoke. They said the clans would fall if I stayed, she said. That someone would use me to break everything. Elias nodded. Fear is a powerful guide, but it is not always an honest one. She studied him closely. You are human. Yes, you don't have psychic sight. Or a lineage sense. How did you find me? Elias smiled faintly. I listened to what everyone ignored, he explained, simply and clearly, without accusing her or her captors. He spoke of patterns, of choice hidden inside rules, of how humans had learned that the most dangerous traps felt reasonable. Tears did not fall. Varelians did not cry as humans did, but her shoulders lowered. Tension eased. No one else asked me what I wanted, she said quietly. That's why they couldn't find you, Elias replied. Outside the station, a shadow moved. Someone had noticed his arrival. Elias felt it before. Sensors confirmed it. The truth had been found. Now it had to be protected. Elias sensed the danger before it showed itself. It was not fear, but awareness, the kind that came from long experience. Stations that were meant to stay hidden did not welcome visitors. People who built quiet refuges rarely acted alone. He did not move toward the princess or the exit. Instead, he raised one hand slowly, a human gesture meant to calm. Someone else is here, said softly. Princess Liren's ears stiffened. They were not supposed to return. That means they never fully trusted you to stay, Elias replied gently. She looked away toward the dark window. The star outside pulsed faintly, distant and cold. They said the galaxy was watching me, that my existence made things unstable. Elias did not argue. He had learned that people believed fear more easily than reassurance. Instead, he asked, Did they ever let you send a message home? Liren hesitated. No, they said silence was safety. Elias nodded once. Silence could be protection, but it could also be control. Humans understood that well. A soft vibration passed through the station. Not an alarm, but a systems check activating. Someone external was testing responses. Elias stepped back, placing himself slightly between Liren and the entrance. Not as a guard, but as a signal. He was here with her. Whatever happens next, he said, you still have choices. She studied him. That is easy to say for someone without a throne waiting. Elias met her gaze. Humans have lived under expectations too. Not crowns, but survival. Sometimes the weight feels the same. The vibration came again, stronger. Lights dimmed slightly, then stabilized. The station was being accessed remotely. Elias moved to a nearby console and brought up a manual interface. The systems were old, but not unfamiliar. Someone had layered new controls over forgotten foundations. That kind of work left gaps. He did not try to lock doors or shut down access. That would only raise alarms. Instead, he adjusted energy flow, redirecting output to non-critical systems. To an outsider, it would look like decay. Who brought you here? Elias asked while working. A coalition agent, Liren replied. Not officially. They spoke as a friend of the clans. That makes sense? Elias said. The most effective lies were familiar faces. Footsteps echoed faintly in a distant corridor. Slow, confident, not a rescue team. Elias turned to Liren. I will talk. You listen. No matter what is said, she nodded, trusting him without fully knowing why. A tall figure entered the chamber, and wrapped in neutral robes, face partially obscured. Their posture was relaxed, almost polite. This was not part of the arrangement, the figure said calmly. The human should not be here. Elias did not respond with accusation. He simply said, You guided her away without harm. You kept her safe. That matters. The figure paused. Respect flickered briefly. We did what was necessary. For whom? Elias asked. For stability, the figure replied. Empires do not collapse from force alone. They fall from symbols. She is a symbol. Liren flinched, but remained silent. Elias folded his hands loosely. And what happens when symbols learn they are being used? The figure's silence answered the question. You convinced her that leaving was her choice? Elias continued. That makes her powerful. But it also makes her dangerous to your plan. The figure stepped closer. You will leave. The princess will remain. This can still end quietly. Elias shook his head. Quiet endings rarely stay quiet. He turned to Li Ren. They feared what you could become if you ruled freely. Her voice was steady when she spoke. They never feared me before. They fear what you represent now, Elias said. A future that cannot be predicted. The figure shifted slightly. Human, you misunderstand the scale of this. Elias smiled faintly. Humans live inside scale. We are small. That makes us notice cracks. He activated his communicator, sending a narrowband signal encrypted through outdated protocols. Not to the palace. To something older, the figure's posture stiffened. What did you do? I asked a question, Elias replied. To the people who were erased when this station was abandoned? Moments later, a response echoed through the station systems. Not words, but access acknowledgments. Old human colonies, once operated nearby, their emergency relays still listened. The station lights shifted tone. You see, Elias said calmly, you hid her in a place history forgot. Humans do not forget places like that. The figure stepped back, reassessing. Li Ren felt something lift inside her. Not safety yet, but clarity. You never intended to harm me, she said to the figure. But you never intended to let me return either. The figure did not deny it. Elias lowered his voice. If you wanted stability, you failed the moment you removed choice. Stability built on silence breaks loudest. Outside the station, distant engines flared, not warships, observers, witnesses. The figure looked toward the viewport, then back at Elias. This ends now. Yes, Elias agreed. It does. He turned to Li Ren. Will you come home? She did not answer immediately. She looked around the chamber that had been both shelter and cage. Then she nodded. Yes, she said, but not as someone hidden, as someone seen. The figure stepped aside without further resistance. The plan had unraveled not through force, but exposure. That was often how human solutions worked. As Elias and Li Ren prepared to leave, a message reached the Fox Queen's palace. Not dramatic, not urgent, simply true. The heir is alive. She is safe. She is returning by choice. The queen closed her eyes for a brief moment. Relief washed through her, followed by something deeper, understanding. The galaxy had tried to solve the problem with power, secrecy, and control. A human had solved it with listening, patience, and the courage to ask the wrong questions. And the consequences were only beginning. The journey back did not feel like a rescue mission. Elias kept the ship's pace steady and unhurried, as if rushing would turn the moment into something fragile. Princess Li Ren sat quietly. Near the forward viewport, watching the stars stretch and fade as they passed through known space again. For the first time since she had left her mother's side, the galaxy felt wide rather than narrow. She did not speak much. Elias did not push her to. Humans understood silence differently than most species. Silence was not always empty. Sometimes it was space to breathe. As they crossed into monitored territory, signals reached them almost immediately. Not threats. Not commands. Questions layered over relief. The Fox Queen's fleet adjusted course to meet them, keeping distance, respecting the message Elias had sent earlier. No sudden movements. No dramatic approach. Inside the palace, as the queen waited, she had dismissed the council chambers and cleared the outer halls. This reunion was not for politics. It was for truth. Elder Saville stood beside her, saying nothing, sensing that words would only get in the way. When the vessel docked, the queen did not sit on her throne. She stood at the entrance, tall and still, every inch a ruler, yet unmistakably a mother. The doors opened. Li Ren stepped forward. For a moment, neither moved. Centuries of tradition and a lifetime of expectation hung between them. Then the queen took a single step down from the dais. Everything else broke. Heir crossed the distance quickly, her composed restraint finally giving way. The queen wrapped her arms around her daughter without concern for observers or recorders. The court officials watching from a respectful distance understood immediately that this moment was not to be interrupted. Elias remained near the doorway. He did not belong in that circle, and he knew it. His work was done, or nearly done. The queen eventually released her daughter and turned toward Elias. Her eyes held gratitude, but also sharp curiosity. "You brought her back," she said. "She came back herself," Elias replied. "I only walked beside her." Queen inclined her head deeply, an honor rarely given to outsiders. "You did what an entire galaxy could not," Elias shrugged slightly. "I listened." No. News spread fast, even without formal announcements. The Heir's return by choice unsettled more than it reassured. Galactic observers analyzed every detail. If Loren had been removed without force, then returned without force, it meant something fundamental had failed. Control. The council reconvened, tension thick in the chamber. Representatives from allied systems demanded explanations. Others demanded assurances. A few demanded Ilias's methods be regulated, documented, limited. The Fox Queen allowed them to speak. Then she raised her hand. "My daughter will address this council," she said. Murmurs filled the room. That was not tradition. Heir stepped forward, her posture calm, her voice steady. "I left because I was told my presence endangered stability," she said. "I stayed because I believed silence protected those I loved. I returned because I learned silence protects nothing." She did not accuse. She did not threaten. She simply told the truth. "Stability built on fear is not peace," she continued. "It is delay." Some officials shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided her gaze. "I am alive because a human treated me as a person, not a problem," Heir said. "If that unsettles you, ask why." The chamber fell quiet. Elias watched from the side, recognizing the moment. This was the turning point, not the recovery itself. Humans knew that finding something lost mattered less than what changed after. Outside the council hall, messages raced across networks. Analysts rewrote profiles. Humanity's classification shifted again, not in power metrics, but in something harder to measure. Influenced Elias prepared to leave the capital quietly. He had no interest in fame or reward, but the Fox Queen requested one final meeting. "You could stay," she said. "Serve as an advisor." Elias smiled politely. "I work best where I am not expected." She considered this, then nodded. "Then leave knowing this. When the impossible returns home, your name will be remembered." Elias bowed slightly. "That is more than enough." As his ship departed, Heir watched from the high balcony beside her mother. She felt different than she had before. Not hardened. Not broken. Sharpened. "They will watch you closely now," the queen said. "They already were," Heir replied. "Now they know I see them too." The galaxy adjusted slowly. Policies were reviewed. Quiet operatives were recalled. Places once used for silent manipulation were abandoned. No longer safe from human curiosity. Some called it coincidence. Others called it luck. Those paying attention called it a lesson. A human had entered a sealed problem and left it open to daylight. Not with weapons or threats, but with understanding and timing, and across the stars. Leaders began to ask a new question. When crises emerged, not who had the strongest fleet, but who could see what everyone else was missing. The answer, more often than not, was human. Time did not rush back into its old shape after the Heir's return. It moved differently, as if the galaxy itself had paused to consider what had happened. Officially, life continued as before. Trade routes stayed open. Councils met. Fleets patrolled. Yet beneath all of it, something subtle had shifted. Princess Heir began to appear beside the Fox Queen in public sessions, not as a symbol to be displayed, but as a voice to be heard. She listened more than she spoke at first. When she did speak, she chose words carefully, not to challenge tradition directly, but to stretch it. Elders, who had once dismissed her quiet curiosity, now found themselves answering questions they had avoided for centuries. The Fox Queen watched this with pride and restraint. She did not guide her daughter's words. She let her find her own balance. Power, the queen believed, meant knowing when not to interfere. Elias Morin did not remain in the capital. He left as he had arrived, without ceremony. His ship slipped into normal traffic, then into quieter lanes. To most of the galaxy, he became a name attached to a solved problem. To humans, he was something more familiar. One of their own who had done what needed doing and moved on. Yet his influence did not fade. Reports began to surface from other systems. Negotiations that had stalled for generations suddenly progressed after human observers were included. Missing envoys were found not by scanning harder, but by rereading conversations. Long-standing conflicts cooled when someone asked a question. No one had thought polite enough to ask. Humans did not claim credit. They rarely did. They simply kept showing up where certainty had failed. The Fox Queen issued a quiet decree that was not announced publicly. It was shared through trusted channels, copied by hand rather than broadcast. When choice disappears, it read, "Seek those who know how to find it again." Everyone knew who it meant. Princess Liren requested to meet Elias one last time before he vanished entirely from public awareness. The meeting took place on a neutral platform, simple and unguarded. No titles were used. "You could have stayed," she said. "You could have shaped policy." Elias smiled gently. "Change lasts longer when it feels like it belongs to everyone." She considered this. "You changed me," I reminded you, Elias replied. "You already knew." Liren nodded. "Will the galaxy learn?" "It always does," Elias said. "Just slower than it likes." They parted without promises. Years passed. The Fox Queen eventually stepped aside. Not because she had weakened, but because she trusted what came next. Liren ascended not amid celebration, but acceptance. Her reign began quietly, marked not by grand reforms, but by consistent, visible honesty. Under her rule, the Varelian clans became known not just for unity, but for transparency. Hidden stations were decommissioned. Silent manipulations lost favor. Problems were brought into the open, even when doing so was uncomfortable. Other species noticed. The galaxy did not become peaceful. That was never realistic. But it became more careful. Leaders learned that secrets could be found. That people once considered weak could unravel complex lies simply by refusing to ignore small truths. Humans, in particular, gained a new reputation. Not warriors. Not conquerors' resources. They were called when something was lost without explanation. When no alarms had sounded, yet nothing made sense. When every powerful solution had failed, humans came without certainty. They asked simple questions. They listened. They noticed, and more often than not, they returned with answers that made everyone else wonder how they had missed them. Princess Liren kept a record of these changes, not as history, but as reminders. One entry read simply, "We feared chaos. We found clarity." Far from the centers of power, Elias continued his work. Sometimes he declined calls. Sometimes he accepted. He aged as humans did, quietly and persistently. New humans followed in similar paths, inspired not by fame, but by the understanding that being human meant standing where others would not. Near the end of his career, a young alien once asked him why humans were so difficult to predict. Elias thought for a moment before answering. "Because we don't solve problems by asking what should happen," said. "We ask what is actually happening." The alien considered this deeply. When Elias eventually disappeared from records, there was no announcement, no memorial. Yet his absence was noticed, not as loss, but as proof that his work had never been about him. Princess Liren, now the Fox Queen, stood once more before the great window of the palace. Stars drifted past as they always had. The galaxy still felt vast. Still dangerous, still full of unknowns, but it no longer felt helpless. She spoke softly. "Though no one else was present, we will remember, not the human's name." She thought, but what he showed them. That even in a galaxy ruled by power and fear, there was room for patience. That sometime,